friends go.
Applied audio. Applied audio.
So tell me where my friends go.
It was discovered today that the rings around the planet Saturn are in fact lost airline luggage.
Tell me where my friends go.
Fade to applied audio.
So like how many watts is this amplifier, man?
About 1 million.
That's cool.
Tell me where my friends go.
Applied audio, Captain.
Yeah, where mama ain't happy, nobody happy.
Okay, now put that drill right over here. Oh, yeah. Oh, that feels good.
Applied audio.
Tell me where my friends go.
Careful with the drums! Careful with the drums!
Well, I was born to sing, but now I just whistle. Applied audio.
Tell me where my friends go.
272-9280.
Welcome, everybody. We've got Krusty with me as always. We got some pretty special guests with us today. From Ultratec, we have Rachel and Tony. Rachel is our sales rep, and Tony is the senior service manager down in Florida. And then the special treat for us today is we have Christopher Roth here joining us from the Office of the Fire Marshal for the town of Brighton. So I know a lot of what he says today will be specific to the town of Brighton. Please defer to your local fire authority for the specifics regarding your situation. But hopefully him joining us will kind of give you a little bit more insight into how to use
maybe some direction.
Yeah, how to use Fog and Haze without the unwanted visit from the fire department. So I'll let you guys take it away from here.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Rachel Robson from Ultratec Special Effects. As John just said, I am a sales rep. I will be speaking for the most part about some products that we have and give you a brief description on the differences between Fog and Haze, and then some examples of 2 different types of low fog that we offer.
And I'm Tony Wickner from the Florida office. This is our virtual booth. We can demo any of the machines that we have. I'm here to support Rachel with demonstrations today.
I guess it's my turn. Christopher Roth. I'm with the town of Brighton, right outside of Rochester, New York. Actually served as the president of the New York State Fire Marshals and sit on a couple NFPA committees. So they were kind enough to ask me to try to share with you at least the code enforcement side of things on how to accomplish what you need to get done with maybe some of your events. Make them safe for not only the partakers and viewers, but hopefully build some kind of strong relationship with your first responders.
Wonderful, thank you.
All right, well, that's great. And thank you, Chris, for joining us too, because us as Ultratec employees often get asked questions where your expertise is definitely appreciated. So I'll go ahead and get started. Just to give you a brief run through, the differences between Fog and Haze is mainly the delivery system and then the particles that end up in the air once they're vaporized. So for Ultratec, we have Haze, our Radiance Hazer, which is created by pumping glycerin and water-based fluid through a 4-port vaporizer. What ends up happening is it creates a visual of very tight, small droplets into the air, and you will be able to reflect light off that. So it's commonly seen in use for beams, beam lights, and then lasers. It's really popular with lasers, of course. Ultratec ourselves only offers one Radiance Hazer, one Haze solution. We manufacture the Radiance Hazer and we offer that as a unit by itself or a touring system. You can run it in standalone mode. You can run it with a remote. If you're running it with a touring system, you can run it with a fan as well to push more haze out there as you need it. And then it runs on 2-channel if you're using it. Runs with the fan and then the pump speed. So it's really easy to control. Approximately, I'll say our Radiance Hazer itself, you can fit either a 1/2 gallon jug or a 1 gallon jug in the machine itself. In the touring system, it's only a 1/2 gallon. I wanted to make mention of that because a lot of people forget. That also, just to kind of something else that's probably a great feature of the Radiance, is that 1 gallon of our fluid will last up to 10 hours for Radiance on high. Now, most people who have used a Radiance Hazer knows you're not going to run a Radiance Hazer on high for 10 hours pretty much anywhere, because that would be a boatload of haze. It covers about 10,000 cubic feet per minute on high. So an example, in a 25 by 25, 16-foot high room, it's going to take you a minute to fill that. So again, you're not gonna do that. There's only one type of fluid for that machine, and again, that is the glycerin water-based luminous 7 fluid. Tony is going to go ahead and give you a little bit of a run through on how to connect the Radiance Hazer in the touring system, and then he's going to give you a display on how it looks.
Okay, so here's the Radiance Hazer itself here. I've actually got them already hooked up, but I'll turn them so we can get a look at the system there. Adjust my camera a little bit. So in the back, of course, there's a power cord, and then it's got DMX options, and it also has a place for a remote control you can use, or you can run it in the standalone mode. This is one of the older legacy models here. We've upgraded this to the new LED address system, but either way, they work the same way. The first is 3 digits, and the last 2 digits should be set in your, well, all 3 digits should be set in your DMX address up to 512. If you set the first digit to 6, then it becomes a standalone mode, and then you would adjust your pump speed and your fan speed with the next 2 digits. So it's got an auxiliary outlet on it too that you can hook a fan up to, and that fan will can run at the same speed as the fan that's on the unit by adjust with your DMX or your remote control. So once again, she said, we're only using luminous 7 fluid in this machine because it's a glycerin base, not a glycol base like the other smoke machines. So I'll go ahead and give a demonstration of the actual Hazer itself, and then I'll show you the other system as well. So I'm using the DMX to do this. Just bring them up to full, and you can see how it can quickly fill a room, and it just puts out a ton of haze.
I think it's important to note too that this haze machine on full,
in most cases, you run it up to full, to get your effect established, and then you back it way down.
Yeah, it'll actually look like a fog machine at full.
Oh, and you know what? Something else that I forgot to mention is, like all of our machines, this is continuous run. So it doesn't need any reheating time upon initial heat. As long as you're feeding our machines fluid, they'll continue to run.
Now the Radiance touring system is the same machine inside the road case, but also with a VersaFan. The VersaFan adjustment tips it up, and then you can just slide that right into the case for storage, and then you can pull her out and adjust that for whatever tip you want for that. The Radiance on top is still running a little bit because there's a little bit of fluid left in that chamber because I ran it at full. It'll take it a few minutes for that to burn off. You want that to burn off before you shut your machine off, and it'll make your machine last longer before the next maintenance cycle. But anyways, I'm going to run the touring system now with its auxiliary fan as well, so it can really move some haze in a hurry. So one of the reasons you want haze in your show or in your room is for lighting effects. I don't really have the right kind of lights in my warehouse for it, but I do have a little laser here. We can show how well that all shows up. You really wouldn't see something like that without that haze in the air. So any questions from my end about any of that?
Can you maybe speak about the difference of your Radiance versus the DF50? The different fluids it uses and why the
water versus oil.
Well, if you've been around for a while, the DF50, and it makes a beautiful haze too, like this, a nice, very dense haze. But it is an oil-based haze. It's made by compressing air bubbles and blowing through a chamber with the fluid in it. And it just an incredible hazer in its time. But in today's modern world with all the electronics and everything, that oil that was in it would just settle on the electronics, settle on the glass lenses, it settle on everything. So electrical problems, mechanical problems, everything ensued, you know, with the advent of moving lights and scrolling lights and everything. So a solution had to be found, and this is what our company came up with. So I've used plenty of DF50s in the past, working at theme parks and all, and it was, you know, at its time, it was a really good hazer. It was based on some older hazers that were used in the movie industry that were, you know, about 4 feet by 4 feet in size. The case of them, they were huge, but anyways, we don't have to worry about this settling on electronics and everything. Is all a very clean fluid and everything. So
yeah, it definitely makes a huge difference, especially with maintenance and all of that. So, and then real quick, can you just talk about you know, when you talk about power cycling, that there's a heat cycle obviously at the beginning, but after you use your machine, allowing it to, you know, sit and run and actually clear itself out, and that stuff's important because it does save on maintenance down the road.
okay, well, it has a 500 watt heater in it, and it takes it about 8 minutes from the time you turn it on to get up to full temperature, where it can start making haze. You don't have to wait for it to completely cool when you're done, but the way the 4-port chamber is made and the amount of fluid that's getting dumped there, especially when it's on a high cycle, some of that fluid will be left behind. So if you leave the hazer on, and you saw how it was bleeding off a little bit, that when it's completely bleeded off, then it'd be okay to shut it off. But, you know, of course, a lot of people are in a hurry to go home at the end of the day, and they just turn it off. And
exactly, and they end up with a whole lot of unwanted maintenance due to,
yeah,
you know,
that will
that
definitely add to your maintenance to do that.
Yeah, because the next time you turn the machine on, what ends up happening is all that fluid that's left in there is going to sit there and burn while it's heating up. And then, as Tony showed me numerous times in the past when he's opened up machines, they look like little hockey pucks stuck in there.
It kind of depends. Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes it's like a jelly.
Yeah, it's like syrup.
Yeah.
Maybe now would be a good time for Chris. A lot of people think there's a misconception if they don't use a lot of it, it won't set off the smoke detectors. If they, you know, just keep it at a low volume. Maybe speak about, you know, how the smokes work and what some of the options are for using these effects machines without setting off the smoke detectors or fire alarms.
Well, the first thing that we can talk about is there's two different kinds of smoke detectors in the industry. One is a photoelectric and the other one is an ionizational. Photoelectric is what it is there's a little bit of a beam that's in the chamber, and when the beam has been broken, that's when the smoke detector goes into alarm situation. So if your concentrate of fog, haze, steam or otherwise gets to a certain level, breaks the beam, and then that causes the alarm to go off. The benefits of an ionizational detector is it's more of it looks at a pattern to make sure that I don't look at just smoke. I look at heat. I look at the rate of the rise of the heat in a format. So usually ionizational is what we call a quick developing fire. Like in a kitchen, you're going to see a flash in the pan situation. So there are tolerances or what they call sensitivity to the smoke detectors. So there is a percentage that I'm allowed to take into the chamber before I actually go into an alarm condition. So there is some validity to saying that if I don't charge the room from floor to ceiling, wall to wall, you may not cause the alarm system to go off.
I'm just going to touch in there because I noticed a couple comments come in, guys. One of which was asking about which one would work better in cold outdoors. I'm assuming they were referring to like a DF50 versus a Radiance. There was another question on there about how to get a nice haze without, you know, it being powerful. And I think this one in particular, maybe you can also answer, Chris. It was regarding the effect that it might have on people with asthma.
That brings up a good point, and I was thinking of this as you were introducing the product and talking about the type of additive that you use within the equipment. A couple things that may want to happen before your event, particularly in New York State, you have to make an announcement to the crowd as to where the appropriate exits are. So this is an opportunity that says we're going to enter a medium within this environment, but by the way, there's an exit to the left, there's an exit to the right, behind you, and so forth. It's very similar, like being on an airplane. They point to the two in the front, two in the back kind of thing. So in New York, we have to provide that kind of education to the public. And this may be your other opportunity to sort of address that and say, if there are people that have breathing problems, asthma, emphysema, any of those COPD, any of those other conditions, this might be your opportunity for them to evacuate themselves and say that, you know, I'm going to wait in the hallway until this is over, or, you know, to a point that they feel that they're safe. So I can't speak to whether it would affect somebody in asthma, but you could make that warning ahead of time to say, we are going to have an event that has this kind of medium in it. And if you are uncomfortable, you know, we'll help you find a way to an exit and then bring you back in when it's been evacuated.
We've had customers ask us that over the years numerous times. And again, our customers, as you are saying, they make announcements at the beginning of their shows and, you know, advising what special effects are going to be used in the show. And a lot of times that information is even spread, you know, as far as even on their marketing side of things, you know, there's specifics that are being used in shows. But I think that's like a very good way to put it, that anybody who has any type of breathing conditions whatsoever are going to go to a show should always ask their doctor themselves. Like, it's better for you to ask that question yourself, right? Like, knowing that something's there, because we've said there's lots of people that have gone to shows with asthma that have been fine, but there's some that haven't. So it's just one of those things that it's particular to people, right? And I think, guys, I think there was another question maybe for Chris. Two different types of detectors easily identified, and how can you determine which kind you have?
That's a tough question. Usually you're going to find that on the packaging, and it's going to be a little bit difficult if they're already installed or hanging on the wall or the ceiling. So in a commercial kind of environment, you're probably going to find that they're going to be mostly photoelectric. You're going to find in a battery operated device that they're probably going to be an ionizational. So that might be the first starting block. The other chance, and I don't want to dove too deep and make all you people fire alarm people, but there are what we call smart fire alarm panels that can have some programming or technology put into this that says, if I have a smoke detector over here in space A or within this space, I'm not going to drive an alarm until I get a second detector go off. That's called verification. So we do this in hotels and motels a lot of times because there's a detector that's usually right outside the bathroom. So when I happen to jump inside, take a hot steamy shower, I open the door, you may end up inadvertently activating that detector outside the bathroom, but it's not going to dump the entire hotel until maybe the other one in the kitchen, or if I happen to open the door to the unit and it goes out in the hallway, another detector goes off. So there are some things in technology that we've embraced to help reduce the number of nuisance alarms that come in. There's a couple other brands that are out there that utilize an algorithm that will say a kitchen fire looks like this, and they built that right into their panel and their detectors. So when it starts sniffing for smoke, if it doesn't look like this algorithm, it says, well, you're not a kitchen fire, I'm not going to go off. But those are, again, some technology things that we utilize during that process.
Tony, I'll let you answer that question regarding which one would work better, outdoors or indoors.
I'm not seeing the questions, but between a hazer or a smoke machine?
Well, I think, no, the question was probably regarding the differences between water-based haze and oil-based haze.
Oh, I think the output is pretty similar to the two of them. It's really going to depend on the weather, you know.
Does temperature affect them?
Not really. Oil-based, I wouldn't know. I don't think so. I've used them outdoors in the past in Florida. I don't have any experience up north with them, but I don't think chilling smoke, chilling haze, but all
the cold
make it
might
tend to
affect-
want to hang low.
The
So
cold
it
may
might not
affect
go-
the low-lying stuff, but not necessarily the rest of it.
Yeah,
I
the
don't think
temperature
so.
would affect that, but I think which one working better outdoors. Yeah, like Tony said, from what I've seen on customers using them in outdoor festivals and stuff like that, it doesn't really matter which one you're using. If the weather's not cooperating and it's windy, neither one's going to look good, right? Like it'll blow away before it goes anywhere. So I think that's dependent on where it is. Like cold outdoors, yeah, like you said, Tony, I'm not 100% sure either because I haven't seen. Typically, us people in the north don't tend to have outdoor festival type things where people are looking for a ton of haze, right?
Right.
Usually they're looking for snow effects at that point, but it's possible because people might.
We have a client who does an outdoor laser show in
Mhm.
the summertime, and he has basically smoke machines, fog machines, not haze, but smoke and fog machines, every point of the compass, like 12 points, around and then he just kind of picks which ones he needs to run based on which way the wind's blowing on a given night to get the smoke into his field. So
That's brilliant. And then the question regarding the how to make it look good without being powerful. I think Tony probably agree with me. The best way to do that is to test it in the area you're going to use it. Typically what we tell people is you're going to kind of run your haze machine on high until it reaches the point of haze that you want in the room. Then you're going to lower it down and basically roll it in a corner somewhere and let it run on low to just maintain it. So it's all dependent on, with the airflow and all those kinds of things. Like Tony said, you're going to try to set it up so that at that point, you're going to understand where your airflow is going to make the change when it kicks in. People walking in and out of, the area, is that going to change it? So it's kind of like one of those things that you kind of got to use it and then figure it out from there. So hopefully that's answered your questions. And if not,
HVAC will definitely play into that. If it's blowing in a certain area, it may move it across the stage a different direction. So you have to put your hazer in a different place.
Sometimes it creates like a completely dead block wall. Like you'll watch fog and haze go up to a point and it just stops.
You can see my laser, is just fine, and it's been off for ever since we, been talking about these different things with the fire marshal there. It's still plenty hazy in here, so that stuff, that particulate matter hangs a very long time.
Yeah, it hangs.
It's a very tight, small particulate. So yeah, it does take a long time for it to dissipate.
The other thing that just popped into my brain is we have to keep in the back of our mind that our rooftop units, depending on their size, may have duct detectors within them. So again, if you're filling a room and the HVAC system is starting to evacuate that smoke through its normal process, and there is a saturation level, the duct detector could have enough smoke in it through that process and cause the duct detector to activate. If the duct detector has been installed correctly and it has been hooked up to the fire alarm correctly, it only what's called creates a supervisory signal, which just says, I'm going to ring in the building and say, hey, there's something going on. There's smoke in here. Maintenance needs to take a look at me. It's not to a point where it evacuates and or summons the fire alarm system. So just to keep that in the back of your mind, depends on the size of the rooftop units and the evacuation of some of those particulates. It might cause that unit to activate, which then could create another challenge because the unit probably will shut down and no longer then evacuate or purge the space.
Sure. And then there's another question here. I know when we used to do work in the city, we were able to pay for a fire watch. The question was, a lot of venues are hard no when it comes to fog and haze. What are some options to being able to be allowed to use fog and haze? A lot of ballrooms, like wedding venues. I know it's department specific or town specific, but maybe touch on that a little bit.
And a second part to that question actually too is there any policies or procedures for disabling the fire alarms?
There is this very distinct procedure in not to get into it, but a lot of times if there's a performance or a venue, there may be the ability to take the smoke detector, beam detector, or the detection over top of the stage down. And then at that point, to piggyback with the earlier question of, you may be able to employ or deploy a fire watch, the challenge you run into is your example with the city of Rochester is when you do that, the city of Rochester has the ability to contract with you to provide that service. Not every volunteer fire department or fire marshal's office may have that capabilities. It may be a one-person organization, and they don't have fire department staff or volunteers there to contract with. So you may end up having to hire a private security firm to perform fire watch activities. We have a very extensive, detailed handout for that. If somebody wants that, we'd be glad to share it on how to initiate a fire watch, what's the requirements, the training requirements, and what's expected of them. So we can, in summary format, we can help you develop that program. You may be, again, you need to hire a local security firm. We would look at their training, look at how they're handling that. How are you taking the alarm offline? How long is it going to be offline? And then how do we reestablish the alarm and or make sure that everything's cleared at the end of the event?
Sure. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and that I know the handout pertains particularly to the town of Brighton, but it would be great if you guys would like to get a copy of that. Let us know, and we'll get in touch with Chris and get a copy for us. So.
Okay, and then there was another question I saw pop up about which product would be best for special effects and theatrical production. I think it depends. We can go through all of the products that we were going to talk about today. But again, I think it all comes down to what are you trying to achieve? What are you looking at? Typically what we do with our customers, and John and Krusty both are familiar with this, because if they have a customer that's looking to achieve something, we all have a discussion and try to figure out what it is that you're looking for. And then we will recommend the options that we have available. And especially, the items that are going to work best for what you're trying to achieve. So that's a really vague question to answer. It depends on what you're looking for. We would recommend the best products available for what it is you're trying to achieve based on whatever that is at the time. But yeah, you can always reach out to Krusty and John if you have any questions about that kind of stuff, because they'll be more than happy to put us all in touch and we'll figure it out. So again, just kind of getting into the fog side of things, the difference, again, manufacturing that, as I explained with the haze, fog is created by pumping glycol water-based fog fluid through a coil system. So as opposed to the haze machine where it's a 4-port vaporizer and it's glycerin, our fog is made with glycol and water in a coil. So there's a heating block, it heats everything up and it goes through. So what ends up happening is those vaporization droplets are much larger. So you could end up actually blocking your light or reducing visibility. It'll create plumes more so than a haze like you just saw. But it's also it's something that's commonly seen to create things that look like blasts or clouds or simulate smoke. So that's typically what that was manufactured to do. We're going to give you a glance at our Premier. And our industrial option Premier, because there's both, and we'll explain that as we go through them. Both can run in standalone mode, just like the Radiance. They can run with a remote, or they can run with DMX. They accommodate our 1-gallon jugs. We don't offer half-gallon jugs of fog fluid. That would probably be very painful for you to change regularly. A fog machine will run about 20,000. This particular fog machine will run 20,000 cubic feet per minute on high. So same thing, 35 by 35 by 16 would take you approximately a minute to fill. The industrial option, and Tony will show you the difference as he's going through them. Basically what it is an industrial hose that is extended, and it allows you to work with a 5-gallon jug instead of a single jug, or one of our 5-gallon pails in our FDS system. So that would be for an installation where you're planning on running the machine, all day, every day for a week at a time, and you don't want to be changing out jugs of fluid regularly. But that's an option. We'll also give you an idea of there's an air option available. I don't think Tony has one there to show you. Again, it's just an explanation. Gives you the ability to have an external air source for extra push. So a lot of times customers will use that as a locomotive type situation. You want to try to simulate locomotive smoke, or it'll also be used to blow out the line so that you don't have those rollback puffs. Because if you put a fog machine in any type of an inverted direction, you're going to have rollback puffs every time that fluid gets into the chamber and you turn it off. It's going to roll back, and then you're going to get those puffs of smoke every once in a while. So the air option does help you to blow that line out. We have several different fog fluid types that can be used. Quick run through, and again, I'll post this stuff so that you have access to it, and we'll also send over cut sheets and stuff that will be available. John and Rusty will be able to send any information that you need over your way. But just a quick run through over our fog fluids. Maximum fog fluid, it's kind of a gray, white in color, and it has a medium hang time. Molecular fog fluid is very white and fluffy, and it has a minimum hang time, which is perfect for our Eclipse or our LSX. Both of them run. It was manufactured to use with low-lying fog. Pro beam long lasting is our longest hang time, and it's white in color, and that's commonly a one for that a customer will use in some cases as a substitute for haze, because if they pummel the air and once it dissipates a bit, it'll hang around for a long time. So it can be used for that sometimes too. Director's choice is white and fluffy, and it has a medium hang time. Quick dissipating fog fluid is white in color, has quick dissipation, so commonly used for CO2 jet simulation in our fog machines. Extra quick, 2 times quicker than dissipation than quick dissipating. So again, it just depends on what you're looking for. Party fog fluid is gray white in color with a long hang time, and it's very cost effective. So we typically sell that to our DJs. There's somebody that they're just looking for a quick fog effect for people that are dancing and stuff like that, and that's what that works great for. And then last, our Halloween haunt fluid was manufactured specifically with a really long hang time, and it's gray in color. It lasts specifically for outdoor Halloween events. So it looks great because it's all spooky, and it lingers for a really long time. Again, any of these fluids are available through Applied. I know that you guys stock Molecular and Maxi, right? Is the 2 that you typically keep in stock, John?
Correct. And Lumina 7.
And Lumina 7, of course. Yes, so again, like I said before, with even using the fog equipment or whatever effect you're looking for, what we typically do is another consideration that we'll always make is, if you're trying to achieve this, we're going to recommend this fog machine and this fog fluid, because that's going to work best for what you're trying to achieve. So feel free to always ask us those questions. We don't mind answering them at all. We're always happy when you get what you're looking for. And now I will let Tony go ahead and take over again and show you our premiere.
But I will say, if you are interested in any of those fluids, we can special order them in for you. We just don't stock them on the shelves. So.
Yes, John will sell you any of our stuff.
So,
Tony?
Sorry if I'm awkward walking in front of some of these cameras and all to get to show you things, but anyways, got a premiere showing there now. It's got a 4-inch hose adapter on the front. It also helps protect you from touching the hot end of this thing. So like a 4-inch dryer hose would fit right on there if you need to extend your effect. Works fine. Just keep in mind when you're doing something like that, you're probably going to be producing a little bit of drip because the fog fluid won't have a chance to expand fully. So the back of these units are very similar to the Radiance. This one does have the new LED things here for setting your channels. So this one's set to channel 3 right now, and DMX power. This has right here, we call it the LSG output. It's for the low smoke generator or the Eclipse. That output turns off and on the fans and opens up the valve on one of those. It can also be used with a floor pocket or with an air amplifier, a fog burst. So it's got a built-in jug holder here. You can got the cutout here so you can see the fluid level too when it gets lower down there. So anyways, we'll do a quick burst with this one. This has got extra quick fluid in it right now, just because of my limited space in here. It'll take it a long time to clear out for our other demos. So this one has what we call just a standard chip in it for how quickly it comes on. I rammed that to full, and it usually takes a little bit of time because it already had fluid in the block that time. It took right off, but when it's been sitting there for a while, it'll slowly build,
And the premiere's continuous run, correct?
Yes, all of our fog machines are.
I didn't
So
hear that
there's
question.
no waiting for
machine.
heating once it's already hot.
No, it'll drop down. Usually, there's a burst at about 30 seconds when you first start it up, and I think Tony kind of showed you that when he first started it. You'll see a large burst at the very beginning when you turn it on, and then as it starts running, of course, fluid going through it is going to cool it down a bit, so it'll drop down in output. But you can continually run it. It will drop down, but it doesn't drop down to, not like that, but.
That's just running at a very low level right now. And then snap it up to full.
Sure, but that's an important thing to note too, though, as opposed to some of the lesser expensive foggers that aren't necessarily continuous run. You might be waiting on a queue and hit the fog button, but that fogger might be in a heat cycle and it won't
You don't get nothing
produce
until it's
fog.
ready.
Whereas that won't happen with any of the Ultratec machines, since once they're heated up, they're good to go whenever. So
Yes, and then as Tony said, so all of our fog machines have the option of having what we call a fast on chip. Typically, it's used when a customer wants to use it with our PFI fog burst or our G3000 mega fog burst, which is that external source of air. Again, a common thing to be used as a CO2 substitution. Instead of using like a cryo effect, you're going to use the fog and the air amplifier. In that case, we always recommend that you get whichever, the G3000 or the PowerFog Industrial 9D with the fast on chip, because what ends up happening is even once the machine it'll immediately go out at full. And again, when you're looking to simulate cryo, that's exactly what you're looking for, right? So our standard one, it ramps up, the fast on chip comes out full. But again, for the ramp up of it, as you saw, it's really hard for us to see the difference sometimes when you're looking at it from this standpoint. You can tell the difference when both machines are beside each other, but to explain it, it's one of those things. But again, if the customer's looking for it, that's what we're going to recommend. If that's what they're trying to achieve, we're going to make sure they get the right machine.
A couple things that came into mind as we saw that. If you're working with a control room or somebody that may be there to deal with sound and lighting, and you may want to establish some kind of discussion with them to say, if there's a certain signal, can we turn the lights up? Because again, if we need to start evacuating people and you're in a low light situation, we've emitted all this smoke, fog, or otherwise, making sure that getting the lights up. And the other thing to keep in the back of your mind is sometimes in large venues, you have these sodium vapor lights that take a few minutes to ramp back up to get to full power. So you may want to just have some kind of alternate lighting scheme put together, so that way, can I get enough lighting to get people started to get to the exits in case there is an event or something happened, so that way we can get them safely, because as lights ramp up, as we're waiting for this heat, haze or fog to be dissipated, can we still start getting these people evacuated safely?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. So yes, that's a great point, and always something that customers should think of when they're planning on using anything. We should make a checklist.
Things you don't think about normally.
Well, you know what? It's true, right? Like it's little things like that, and especially in enclosed rooms and things, it's like you should always think about the safety factors of things when you're creating anything. And that's why, again, we always revert back to, please talk to your local fire department. We don't want to tell anybody to do anything that is going to be unsafe for anyone in any way. And those are all valid things that are going to get brought up if they make that call, right? So, okay.
But just one more thing, if I may, before you jump on.
Yep.
And it ties in New York State. If I have an event that has more than 500 people, I am required by law to provide what's called crowd managers at a point that there is not more than one crowd manager for every 250 people. So the quick answer of what a crowd manager is the best way I can explain it is like an usher. Mm-hmm. Is there somebody there that is going to be able to direct me to an exit? Is it going to be able to do something safely? You may have a flashlight in his hand. He may be able to give you some kind of direction. So back to when you may be having these effects in large venues, when the venue reaches that certain threshold of 500 people, not only maybe you're working with a fire watch, but now you're going to be working with that trained staff to deal with the crowd and crowd management, crowd movement as well.
Very helpful. Thank you, Chris. Did you have anything more to add, or do you want to go on? Are we good to go on to CO2?
Let's see if we can play with some CO2.
All right, sounds good. Okay, so again, we're going to discuss two different options that we have that Ultratec manufactures as far as low fog is considered. So there's going to be a discussion about liquid CO2 delivery versus solid CO2 delivery or dry ice. We manufacture the Eclipse and LSG. Both are using solenoid type technology to deliver liquid CO2, create a cold box where you're going to pummel fog through, again, glycol water-based fog. And you're going to pummel that through the cold air, and it's going to give you the ability to direct that fog and keep it low to the ground. What it ends up looking like is thick white clouds, like remaining close to the ground, or gives you the ability to direct them. So for instance, we have a fog curtain. We're not going to show that today, but again, that's a direction that you can do. If you need to direct fog in a manner like that, you're going to have to cool it in order for it to work. So with our Eclipse, it runs on 2 channels of DMX. Channel 1 would be for your fog. Channel 2 would be your CO2. It has a 600 CFM variable speed fan. There's a stainless steel drain on it. It's a solid one-piece plastic body with built-in handles, which makes it really easy to maneuver around with. It's very light in the basic model that comes on a cart. It also is available in a road case. It has a locking quick adapter 10-inch hose connector. And again, with the liquid CO2 usage, if you're running it with a high pressure tank that has a dip tube, it's going to go through 7.5 pounds per minute. If you're running it with low pressure doer, same thing, 7.5 pounds per minute. And Tony will give you a run through of that.
Okay, well, I've got the Eclipse up in the shot there. Rachel mentioned earlier the industrial option on a Premier. The difference really is it's just a much longer hose. So it'll reach into a 20-liter bottle instead of the standard 4-liter bottle. So this one does have that option on it, even though we're still using a 4-liter bottle. I've got it hooked up to CO2. This machine can use regular bottled CO2, liquid CO2, or it could use the refrigerated CO2 that you would get in a Dewar tank. It has a hookup for both options. You just move this hose to the other outlet if you'd like. It has a fan speed control on the back. My camera won't reach this far, but it's there. So
we had it at the expo last year.
Option I was telling you about that comes off the back of the machine and plugged into the machine. That's what turns on the fan and opens up the solenoid for the CO2. As you mentioned, we're using the molecular fluid. This fluid makes the most sense for this because it's a very dense white. It also dissipates about the temperature where it wants to start rising up. So it's just like the perfect fluid for the Eclipse or for the LSGs. So this has a 10-inch hose output. The hose is connected on there with a little simple twist lock front end on it. It's quite simple to use. It's got a little locking pin in there. You just push it on and give it a twist and it stays on there real good. So I don't really have enough room in my booth here to operate this, so I've opened up the curtain on the one side and I'll have a camera pointing out into that area out there. But when you're running these machines, you always give it the CO2 first, which would be whatever your DMX channel is +1 is going to operate that LSG output. So now we're running CO2 to chill the box off, and then we'll add some smoke to that from the Premier with the channel 1. And let's get the other camera going. I don't have a lot of CO2, so we can't run it for too long today. It's a little hard to get right now. So, but I don't have enough. Where I must have a, oh, okay. Because I was using the industrial option, there was a little gap, a fluid gap in there during that long hose there. It wasn't completely purged out. So.
But the idea here is you're chilling the fluid. And so in addition to using the molecular fluid as it heats up, when it gets to that temperature and dissipating, it's only reaching about your waist level, right?
So sounds like I'm already kind of running low on CO2, but this area out here now is all filled up with the low line smoke. So,
and it usually, John, it usually doesn't come up that high. I would say that, you know, with our eclipse, it typically, as you can see, it's coming up to about Tony's knees, and then it starts to dissipate. So that's that difference between the molecular fog fluids and other fluids, right? It was designed specifically to start dissipating before it comes up too high. But as you can see, as some of it rises higher there, that's exactly what air circulation can do. It'll change even the outcome of the way that low fog stays close to the ground. So it's always important when you're using it, specifically if you're going to use it in a live show, you want to try to do a test run so that you have an idea of what's going to happen when there's people moving around and there's air circulation going on. You want to set it up where it's going to look the best, right?
my front door's open too because UPS hasn't picked up yet. So I got all the back doors shut, but there's still some movement in here. So
okay. And then we have we have a little CO2 data sheet, a data calculation sheet that we kind of use with the brief explanation of a way to calculate the CO2 that you're putting into the air versus how much you should, how much oxygen you have to keep in the air. But again, we always say that we recommend that you contact your local fire department to discuss safe operating procedures. Like those are all things that you should do ahead of time, especially if you've never done this before in your location. Let me give you. I mean, like anything else, it's one of those things where we say that CO2, it can be used safely. It just is something that you have to remember to do, right? So I just posted that in that chat area. So anybody feel free to have a look at that and read through it. And then if you ever have any questions also, you can always contact us and we can put you in direct contact with Don, our R&D manager. He's very, very familiar with all these safe practices as well.
If maybe I can chime in here for a couple seconds.
Absolutely. I was just going to call your name.
Back to a live performance. If you're going to do this in front of a live situation and say you're in a staged environment or an environment that you're putting a production on, be careful with CO2. I understand the effect that you're trying to get at, but you want to take a look and say, do I have an orchestra pit? Do I have someplace else that now this, for those of you that may or may not know, CO2 is heavier than air, and it is an asphyxiant. So it depends on the amount that you may be using. You could also start turning your orchestra pit into a pool of CO2. So you have to really take this into account and make sure that you're taking a look at the big picture of how much are we going to pump into the space? How are we monitoring it? How are we going to evacuate it? Those kind of things, because if you have lower spaces, or even if you're doing a venue that has a basement, I'll go back to the old days when the downstairs cabaret in Rochester used to be the downstairs, in it, and it had a lower level. You got to be careful that you're not going to start introducing some kind of an asphyxiant in those situations. And somebody nonchalantly goes downstairs to get a piece of equipment and you don't see them for a few days. That's because probably, that was in an oxygen deficient environment. So be real cognizant of using CO2 in those kind of situations or an enclosed situation, because it will evaporate or displace oxygen. Just for you to do a little bit of quick math, 1 molecule of CO2 will displace 500 molecules of oxygen.
And Matt, I don't know if John, were you able to make it visible in the chat there?
I can't copy it. It's at the bottom. Can you just click to all panelists and attendees right above the line? It won't let me copy it and repaste it. So
okay, so I'll put that back in there. All right. But yes, I'm glad you brought that up, Chris, because that is something that we ought, like, again, when it comes to running the Eclipse or the or older version of the LSG, again, that's definitely something that we bring up with customers, is exactly that. Is it on a stage? Is it going to be going down? Is there going to be rooms underneath? You want to take all that stuff into consideration when you're using it. It can be safely done. You just need to be aware of these things ahead of time and then take into consideration. And the other thing to take in consideration, like you were saying, if you're going to have a venue of 500 people in there, well, every time we breathe out, we also emit. So those are all things that have to be taken into consideration ahead of time. That's why we say you should do your calculations based on how many people you're going to have there and make sure that everything's going to be safe. Because it might be a difference between saying you can run it for 20 minutes. Nope, you can only run it for 5. Or, you know, and again, like you said, making sure there's proper ventilation and then the safety aspect of people getting in and out and things like that. So was there anything more for you to add, Chris?
The only one other thing to keep in the back of your mind is you may be hooking up that CO2 tank to your machinery, but you may have other tanks that are there for storage purposes or for replenishment. So those also come into account in the calculation of within the building for quantity of material. And one of those tanks could also have a leak in it. So you have to be real careful on the storage and handling of that material because of just that being the asphyxiation concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what you had brought up earlier is a really good way to do it. If there's, you know, those are all good things for people to know that if you're going to have, you know, several amounts of things in the area, you're going to have extra tanks hanging around. It's good to contact your fire department and get that oxygen reader. Like that's probably the safest way for you to take care of everything, right? Like making sure that everybody's going to be safe is always a priority. So next up, we're going to go on ahead and look at our dry ice version of CO2. We manufacture the dry ice machine, which is using dry ice, whether it be pellet form or solid form broken into pieces, and it's dumped into 5 gallons of extremely hot water. And what ends up happening is it creates low fog, just very similar to what we saw with cooling fog. It ends up looking like, you know, white clouds of fog, and it'll stay close to the ground as well. The dry icer itself holds 20 pounds of dry ice. That's the capacity in a stainless steel basket. It has a low water shutoff indicator. There's a light on the top of it, which Tony will be able to show you. There's a 4-inch hose adapter on the front. You can run the dry ice machine with a hose adapter or without. It's completely up to you depending on how you're doing it. It's made out of durable corrosion resistant polyethylene material. So it's a solid base, which, you know, really is helpful preventing leaks. It's got a 3-step pivotal ratchet system. So again, this is a machine that's manual operation. So it's not fancy. You can't hook it up to DMX. You actually need to have somebody standing there operating it. So again, you want to take those safety factors in where you're talking about heated water and dry ice. So there's the 2 things that people have to take into consideration when it comes to safety. But the operation of it itself, it's capable of about 5 to 7 minutes of runtime on the full 20 pounds, as long as the machine is extremely hot. And then there's also heavy duty latches on the top to be able to shut it up and stuff. So, Tony?
Okay, well, I've already got this one heated up. It has about 5 gallons of water in it. It takes maybe 45 minutes for it to get up to full temperature. Here's the lid she was talking about. It's got some turning latches, but you close it to lock it in place. It has a gasket on the top here that seals it all in there. The light she was speaking of is right here. It's off right now because I unplugged it because it was very hot. So it doesn't need to be that hot. But there's a float valve in here because this is plastic and we're using heater elements like from a water heater. It would potentially melt this if it didn't have the water in it. So the float valve won't allow this to come on, and once the water gets to a level too low. So here's the lever she was speaking of. It's got 2 positions for dropping the stainless steel basket into the water that you put it in. I've got it out now. If I hold this up, if you can see that basket or not. No, I can't get it high enough. So I need a portable camera that's
on your back.
yeah, one that, you know, like a wireless one you can walk around with. So anyways, here's the hose attachment here. 4-inch hose attachment. Generally, you don't need to use a clamp on it. It's big enough and there's enough friction where it'll stay in place. But sometimes this thing can really put out quite a blast when the water's quite hot. So the CO2 comes in a couple different forms. It comes in block forms and it comes in pellet forms. I could only find it locally today. In the block form, I've busted it up into smaller pieces. So, and I usually put it into a bag of some sort so it's an easy dump. instead of trying to put that bigger block in there and bust it up then. So you want to get this in. Some of this stuff that's just broken up is down such a fine piece that it's going to fall in through the grates and it'll start smoking right away. So you need to do this as kind of a nice fluid step to get it into the basket. So
and so that's like part of our safe handling that shows and stuff like that, and always recommending to customers is making sure you're in a ventilated area, that you have goggles on, that you have glasses, that you have, or sorry, not goggles and glasses, you have your goggles on, you have your gloves on. We always take those extra precautions and make sure that our customers know that when you're working with dry ice, you have to, you know, again, take into consideration what you have, dry ice proper handling. So it's not just a matter of sticking your hand in a bucket and, you know, filling up your basket.
So that little bit that we're seeing right now is just where a little bit of it fell through the basket in there and is reacting with the hot water. So I'll go ahead and put this in the first position now. And we're getting, you know, just a nice light flow. If this was pellets, it'd be stronger than this. Pellets have a lot more surface area, so the reaction's a lot stronger, but it also doesn't last as long either. So now I'll go ahead and put it in full position so we can get, you know, the full effect there. And we're getting a pretty strong output. I'll switch cameras here to the other area there. And I mean, this stuff stays super low. But there is some issues with dry ice you need to consider as well, where it comes out of the hose because of the steam. It can be it can leave a little wet spot that could cause a slip hazard. So you got to keep that in mind if you're using it for a dance floor or something like that. Usually you could catch all that with a couple towels down in front of it and let it roll across that. So I'm going to spin this camera around for a moment.
But the other thing to remember is dry ice isn't as readily available up here. So you can get it on Friday for a weekend, but it decreases in volume by 50% every 24 hours. So
yeah,
for a Sunday show, you know, the only place that sells it up here is Irish Carbonic, and they're only open Monday through Friday. So for a Sunday show, you have to almost buy 200% more dry ice than you would be using to make sure you have enough for a Sunday show. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Okay, Chris, did you have some stuff you can add there?
One, just be careful, back to your Friday, Sunday analogy, be careful of transportation. If for some reason you think you're going to put it in your igloo cooler, drop it in your car in the back seat and drive home, you may not get home because it depends on how that has been evaporated. We've had a couple circumstances where there's been Dippin' Dots delivery people that have done this, put it in a cooler, tried to transport it from one location to another and actually been succumbed by dry ice fumes or fumes from that. So the key to this is well ventilated areas and isolation, as you said, protective equipment and so forth. So I know we get lazy sometimes near things that we get comfortable with, but again, just take into account that just throwing it in a cooler in the back seat, the lid's not tight. It could be still off gassing and causing some danger to you.
Yeah, that's definitely something, Chris, that we mention to customers when they're talking about purchasing this machine, is making sure that, you know, with transport, if they're going to pick up the dry ice themselves and they don't have a delivery, you want to make sure that you have your windows open. Even if the lid is closed, like you want to make sure that those windows are open in the back seat and that nobody's back there, and that, you know, you've got that constant airflow for that exact reason, because you never know if there's a leak coming through or anything. And then same thing with storage, John and Krusty. We always inform customers to exactly that, right? It's going to dissipate over time, but you want to make sure it's in a very well ventilated area, because as it's dissipating like you're putting it into the air, right? So again, just like you said, Chris, you want to not be lazy when it comes to that kind of thing, because it's one of the things that's probably, you know, what makes it so scary to people is because you can't see it. And that's why you just don't want to become lazy when it comes to that. Again, I go back to frequently saying it can be safely used. You just have to be aware and stay on top of that.
One of the things, just to try to add some humor to this, is when we have a power outage in our local energy purveyor, Rochester Gas and Electric, they go to various firehouses and drop off pallets of dry ice. And where do we put them? Inside the truck bay, because we don't want, we don't want somebody to steal a bag of dry ice or anything. So we put it in a secured firehouse, and here this thing potentially off gases for, 2, 3, 4 days. And we don't think about those kind of things, where if we just left a pallet outside in front of the firehouse, it still has the same ability and does what it needs to without causing a hazard to the occupants. So just little things. Again, we in the fire service, we still do dumb things too.
Mm-hmm. We all make our mistakes. That's the idea, right? Try to remember what the safety things are, and make sure you're trying to follow them the best that you can. And then like the same thing. We do that. We do our best to not do that. Like we have a pretty good procedure set up for exactly that. With trade shows and stuff like that, we have, this is where the gloves go. This is where this goes. This is where this goes. And everybody knows that you go through, because you can't open it up until you actually have all that stuff on, because it's sitting right there on top of it. So if you happen to, dump everything else out, well, there you go. But
and then real quick too, a lot of places, especially school districts and things of that nature, may already have systems in place to get dry ice and or CO2, and it may already be delivered, regularly to their facilities, and may have storage procedures in place and whatnot too. So, look to the local faculty to, aid you in, obtaining some of these products.
Mm-hmm.
Dining halls, cafeterias.
Yeah. Chris, I was also going to ask you to just maybe touch on, because another thing that we commonly get asked, and it's great that you're here so you can answer this question. We commonly get asked, even with CO2, well, if I'm using the dry ice or a low-lying fog, will it set off a fire alarm?
Probably not as readily, because as you know, smoke detectors are generally on the ceiling. So if you're using a low lying, where it's only going to get up to ankles, or if it's going to get up to even possibly knees, your chances of you setting the alarm off is less. But you still want to look at those considerations. So the fire alarm may not be as important as it is the life safety hazard, as being the asphyxiant or having some of those other procedures. So we may be a little bit more lax on the fire alarm side, but we may need to provide some of our significant awareness on the hazardous material side.
Exactly.
Perfect. I know we're a little over time here, but do you guys have a couple minutes to hang out for questions?
Absolutely.
Yep.
Perfect. The first one, Chris, is there any way to use fog or haze in venues that are equipped with beam detectors?
There is an opportunity to take the beam detector down. As I said back before we chimed in here, we tried to do this at RIT at the Gordon Fieldhouse. It depends on how the beam detector is designed. Is the beam detector over top of the crowd? So are you taking the crowd protection down, or is the beam detector north and south that may be just over top of the stage area? So you may be able to look at how the beam detector is deployed, and is there an opportunity to take that one zone or one beam out of programming, so therefore I can leave the rest of the building still up and protected. So
in that facility specifically, is there a way to utilize those types of products in that facility?
There was, but I said, unfortunately, the rooftop units were installed lower, so they had to switch the beam detectors. So it used to be basically they had 7 that were going to go the short way, but they ended up putting 2 in the long way. And by doing the 2 the long way, we couldn't take them off, because you were taking the beam over top of the crowd offline, where if they were the short way, we might be able to take 1 or 2 of them over top of the stage, but left the 3 or 4 that were over top of the crowd.
Does that change with a fire watch?
When you disable a fire alarm system, one of the options is to add the fire watch, so that you're the person or personnel that you're allowing to perform that function are doing just what a smoke detector would do. Is they're walking around looking for hazards, looking for signs of fire and other things. So the fire watch is in lieu of taking the system down or offline.
Okay, so in that situation, the reason I ask is this, actually the questions are coming specifically from that facility. So in that situation, they potentially would have the ability to use these products if they do fire watch and go about the right procedures.
They could, but I'm gonna throw out, it would be a site specific. If for some reason that particular building is regulated by the Office of Fire Prevention and Control, their own people, their insurance. So there may be more stakeholders that are involved in
Sure,
that
they've
decision
got
process.
their people on their side they have to deal with, but as far as the county's concerned or whatnot, the town.
There may be options, but you would have to have a sit down to determine what those options are and or what the other alternatives are going to be. It's like the if you're going to do this, I got to do something different to mitigate that. So what are you going to give me by doing this other thing?
Sure. Okay. Yeah, just trying to clarify for them. So
yeah, and I guess this is one of those situations where it's better to open a dialogue with your local fire jurisdiction rather than, just do it and hope for the best kind of thing, right?
It is, and I'm going to try to again add a little humor to here. It's hard for me to say yes. It's easy for me to say no. I can say no and you're all done. When I say yes to your thing, I mean I got to go to work. I got to work with you to figure out ways to do this. So part of my thing is I want to say yes because I want you to have a successful event. I want people to have a positive experience. We want them to be safe. So my job is to do that, is to sit with you and figure out how can I say yes.
Sure. And then you were talking about crowd managers earlier. Is there something you can drop in the chat with more information on the requirements and what that entails?
Yeah, I'll put together like a little fact sheet. Is there a chance I can email one of you two and maybe you could just distribute it to them?
Yeah, that's no problem at all.
As I said, and not to belabor because I know we're running a little over, but we established this probably 10 or 15 years ago at the Dome Arena when they had like the Guitars for Stars and gun shows and etc. We would put people at those venues for two reasons. One, you would see us walking around with jackets that said Fire Marshal and etc. Gave you peace of mind that somebody's walking through the building and there's some levels of safety there. But it also gave them an opportunity if there's problems that arose, how they get a hold of you. You see this at CMAC, you see it at other, you go to the Red Wings game, there's guys in yellow jackets. It's a known thing with these crowd managers. It's just now there's some formalized training requirements that come with some of that function.
Sure. Great. And then Tony, I think this one's for you.
Okay.
A customer is in a scenario where there's a video vendor and a lighting vendor, and the lighting vendor would like to use haze for the lighting effects, but the video company has vetoed the use of water-based haze, because of the potential damage to the fan filters and the fans on the projector, even though the projector is more than 200 feet away. Any tips or advices or how to mitigate any risks of damage to the projectors?
I haven't heard that complaint before. It used to be about the oil-based haze that they would complain about that. I imagine if the water was dense enough, but this is not, the water's not what you're seeing here. It's pretty much the glycerin. I have to talk to our engineer about that a little bit, but I have not heard of that.
I suppose too that you would be correct in that it's probably more related to oil-based than water.
Mm-hmm. He's probably used to the old, no, we can't use hazers, and water-based has been around long enough too, and he probably didn't know the difference. So I don't want to say that. You have a guy in the video field, could very well know what he's talking about, but and run into that situation, but I haven't heard that.
Sure. But I mean, all of your fluids that you produce are safe to breathe in. Anything, no adverse health effects or anything like that, right? There's safety sheets on all your information.
Absolutely. It's all available online. And then I'm just also going to throw into the chat the Actors Equity, a direct link. Anybody who, hasn't read it already, have some time, go to that website. There's all kinds of testing that has been done, calibration factors, all that type of stuff. So yes, this has all been approved to be, it's considered safe to be used by Actors Equity. So again, it's how it's manufactured. It's water-based, either glycol or glycerin, depending on which one you're using. So feel free to go and read through the experts, as I always say.
Awesome. Well, we will compile a list of the links and all the information that was presented today, and we can get everyone a copy if they're so interested. And then I just want to thank Tony, Rachel, and Chris again for joining us today. And
Yes,
if you have
thank you.
any other questions, feel free to get back in touch with Krusty or myself, and we'll be happy to pass your question along and find out an answer for you. So thanks,
Awesome.
everybody.
Thank you. This was
You.
fantastic. We really appreciate it. Nice to meet you, Chris. Thank you.
Call me anytime. Thanks for the invite. I had a great time, folks.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.
The good kind of fire marshal.